Just waking up in the morning, gotta thank God. I don't know, but today seems kinda odd. No barking from the dog, no smog. And Mama cooked the breakfast with no hog. Sound check? Sound check. Sound check. Testing. One, two, three. Testing one, two, three.
Let's talk about zombie films. Okay, so I need to preface everything I'm about to say with a fundamental fact about myself. I am too fragile for zombie movies. I know, crazy. For somebody who watches horror movies as much as I do, you would think that gross and disturbing things would not bother me, at least not anymore. You do get desensitized after a while, you know? So it stands to reason that zombie movies should be the very last thing on my list of things that would wig me out. By the way, that list isn't actually very long at all. I mean, I've been watching horror movies, hardcore horror movies, since I was about 13 years old. So a lot of that fear response thing has been burned to cinders in my brain. Really, at this moment, there's only one thing that I absolutely cannot deal with, and that's anything having to do with the handling or consuming of poop. I can't do it. It's the reason why I have not and will never watch the Human Centipede movies. I don't care if the poop eating is implied. I can't, just thinking about it makes me want to gag a little bit. But zombie movies are a little different for me in that they have always kicked me in the proverbial nuts, so to speak. As a result, I have found that I can only watch the average zombie movie for maybe 2 hours a month. That's if I want to keep my sanity. See, this was a thing that I found out about myself way back in the 90s. One Saturday, I decided it would be a good idea to sit down and watch all of George Romero's Living Dead series. Now, at the time, that series only consisted of about 3 movies. So, yeah, I burned about 6 hours that day watching horror movies. And if you know anything about me, if you've been following me for a while, you know that for me, that's rookie numbers. But in the process of watching the films from my favorite director of zombie movies at that time, anyway, I discovered that my psyche is not able to process what goes on in your average zombie flick. Like by the end of Day of the Dead, I was having a serious existential crisis. And that's really messed up for a girl like me because that basically soft locked me out of a lot of reindeer games. For example, I was only able to get through season 1 of The Walking Dead, and just barely at that. And I have not seen a single episode of The Last of Us. I know. I realize how tragic that is. I mean, at least with The Last of Us, I do know the storyline because my oldest daughter played those games religiously when they came out. So I guess in that way the FOMO isn't quite that deep. But that being said, just because zombie movies are not a thing I can realistically have a 5-course meal of, that doesn't mean that I don't still love the genre. As it happens, zombie movies are one of my favorite types of horror movie, as a horror movie lover, and also as a writer. And if I'm going to explain to you why that is, we got to jump in the Wayback Machine and look at a little history of zombie movies. Okay, kids, so if you were to ask any horror movie aficionado or film history nerd what the first zombie movie was, they would undoubtedly tell you that it was 1932's White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. But if you really want to know where the actual concept came from, you would have to go even further back to West African folklore. Yeah, fun fact. As it happens, the word zombie is a bastardization of about several different African words from different countries within Africa with a variety of different meanings. For example, the Congo has a word, zombie. Nzambi, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. But this word means God in the Congo. And zombie actually translates to fetish. But the common thread with the etymology of the word is that there are stories all over Africa about people who appear dead but aren't. And in a lot of those cultures, those people are referred to in a variation of the word that we know as zombie. Now, I bet you're wondering how those stories got to America. You're probably not. I would hope that you already know how that happened. Basically, some of the people who were enslaved in America brought a lot of their religious traditions with them. And a lot of those traditions were melded into Catholicism and created new religions, such as voodoo and hoodoo. Okay, so specifically speaking, Haitian voodoo is kind of where the concept of the zombies as we know them began. So it's important to note that zombies within Haitian folklore are people who have died but were reanimated through ritual and medicine. When they're brought back as vacant, mindless beings who end up serving whoever it was that rose them. Or at least that's my understanding of it. The point is they don't eat people and they don't eat brains or anything. They're just the dead returned as husks of their former selves. And that's an important thing to note because when these rituals were observed by anthropologists and adventurers from the West, they came back with stories of literally the dead coming back to life. In fact, one of the first accounts of this phenomenon was in the 1929 novel, The Magic Island. That was written by a dude named W.B. Seabrook. So Seabrook was an adventurer and an explorer, whatever. Anyway, he went to Haiti and wrote about his experiences in this book. Now, as you can probably imagine, he embellished quite a bit, which, as will happen in America, ended up becoming a trend that would spawn horror movies and novels that would systematically get farther and farther from the original source material and definition of what a zombie actually is. Like, if you watch White Zombie, which came out a few years after Seabrooks' book did, and then compare it to, say, Night of the Living Dead, which came out some 30 years later, that's a pretty significant jump over a short period of time. Like the zombies in White Zombie aren't undead per se. Like they are, but they're a little closer to the Haitian voodoo definition of what a zombie is, and that they're mindless servants as opposed to man-eating monsters. Yeah, you compare that with any modern zombie movies, huge difference. Now, the other big thing that started happening within the evolution of the zombie movie in particular was the shift in focus. I mean, if you were to watch any pre Romero zombie movie, for the most part, the horror is focused on the monster or monsters in question. It's actually not until Night of the Living Dead that the water starts to get a little muddy on that. And we really start to focus on the living and how they cope with the monster invasion. Mind you, this is not a new concept. Lots of old school creature features do the exact same thing. A really good case in point would probably be like War of the Worlds, for example. All of that, from the radio show to the movies, kind of focus more on the people than the actual aliens, without taking away the fact that aliens are a threat. You know what I mean? So in Night of the Living Dead, the majority of what we're seeing has more to do with what these people are going to do to survive rather than anything about the monsters. In fact, all we really know about the zombies in Night of the Living Dead is that they're really slow moving and they eat people. We don't exactly know where they came from or why they're attacking the protags, but none of that matters. What actually matters is the living and how they get out of that situation. And it's really kind of messed up because to top all of that off, it subverts the survival horror movie tropes in that no one lives. Like the story that's told is pretty freaking bleak and feels kind of hopeless, which fundamentally speaking is part of zombie horror. And it's the part of it that I actually appreciate, just because it reminds us sometimes that the stories that we tell in fiction sometimes are like the stories that we tell in real life. And in real life, not everything ends with happily ever after. And that, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in the spaces in between, is where the rub is for me, really. So while I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that the horror movie that I'm watching might end badly, you know? I'm just not good with it happening on a regular schedule, if you know what I mean. See, if there's one thing that I've always been acutely aware of, it's that reality has a way of curb stomping you when you least expect it. And sometimes that curb stomp can come in succession, followed by a gut punch or five. And knowing that, I don't know, I'm not really the kind of person that likes to bathe in that kind of energy in my daily life. Like, I don't like a whole lot of reality in my reality, if you feel me. Basically, I'm completely good with getting screwed raw every once in a while. Once it turns into a 6 hour marathon, things start to chafe. So yeah, as it turns out, I can watch about 10 to 12 hours of any other horror movie genre. Zombie movies happen to belong to the one genre that only gets its lick in once a month, if that. Does that make me a masochist? I don't know. Is there a word for that? I mean, what does it mean when you can watch the entire Saw series in one sitting, but three zombie movies can fold you like a lawn chair? In any event, none of that is to say that I don't like zombie movies. I do, actually. Particularly the modern ones because they involve character development and storytelling to make them work. Like, think of the last time you ugly cried during a horror movie. I'm willing to bet you $1 million that a zombie flick was responsible. On that note, let's break down a few of my favorite all time zombie movies of all time, starting with Night of the Living Dead. Of course. Honestly, I feel like I talk about Night of the Living Dead at least 3 times a year, every year since I saw it when I was a kid. It's honestly one of those movies that I have personally analyzed a bunch of times. And that's, primarily because the dynamics between the characters are so different. Like you've got 6 or 7 people from wildly different backgrounds, all forced in this one space to try to survive the night. And the thing is, I honestly believe that each of these characters are perfectly reasonable people outside of this situation. They're your friends, your sister, your brother, your boss. They're normal everyday people. They're not who they become during the course of this story. But that's like the fascinating thing about Night of the Living Dead is that each and every one of them ends up crashing out in their own way during the course of the movie. I'm saying they either panic or fall apart completely, or they just shut down, or like in the case of Ben, our hero, they man up and go straight to playing defense to protect everybody. And like even the asshole of the group is only an asshole because of the way the pressure is affecting him. Like Harry, our asshole in this ragtag group, he straight up starts seeing everyone else as threats as the story goes on. And he sees them as threats that are just as powerful as the monsters outside, so much so that it affects the decisions that he ends up making. And that's all in the name of protecting his family. Well, mostly his family. He is also kind of a selfish asshole. The point is, what Night of the Living Dead actually demonstrates to us is that the most sane, rational person can turn into the monsters that they're hiding from if enough pressure is applied. It's a very fascinating take on humanity as a whole, right? Okay, so the next movie on my list is going to be Shaun of the Dead. Now I know a couple of you would rather lean into the comedy aspect of Shaun of the Dead as opposed to the horror, but make no mistake, this is a horror movie in every sense of the word. But but the cool thing about Shaun of the Dead is that it takes these zombie movie tropes and makes parodies of them without losing any of the actual horror. And I'm not putting down parodies, mind you. Two of my favorite movies of all time are Airplane and The Naked Gun. Like I love a good parody. I'm saying though, a lot of the times parodies lean so hard into making fun of the tropes that they actually literally lose the plot. Like you end up watching a movie that's probably very funny, but the whole point of the movie, whatever it is completely buried in jokes most of the time. And that just doesn't happen in Shaun of the Dead because the movie itself is more than just a zombie movie. It's a movie who is created by someone who not only loves the genre, but gets the genre. It's one of those things that I think I've touched on in one of these videos that horror, sometimes horror is best when you don't take it completely seriously. And when you watch a movie that can ride that edge, between, what's ridiculous and what's legitimately scary. Perfection. And it's got a solid story. Like the protection is just a regular guy who finds himself in a situation where he has to lead his friends to safety during a zombie outbreak. And actually, it could be debated whether or not he has to, but that's beside the point. In the event, his friends kind of make up your basic zombie movie character tropes, with the most important ones being the asshole and the guy that makes everything worse. Only in this case, unlike a lot of other zombie movies, they managed to split that character up into two people. And even though a lot of it is played up for laughs, we don't really lose the concept of what pressure can do to people in these situations. And what ends up happening is that they become these amplified versions of who they are, or as in the case of Sean, they become a competent leader, which is crazy that Sean goes from zero to hero during the span of this movie. And honestly, you love to see it. Like, if there was a zombie movie that I could quote and do quote on a near daily basis, it's this one. I don't know, I genuinely enjoyed watching these ordinary people in this absurd situation. And also, the scary bits were great too. Okay, so last on my list is Train to Busan. Now, I am about to make a bold statement here. I hope you're sitting down. Train to Busan is the best horror movie I have ever seen. And I need you to really appreciate that statement. As a person who has consumed a lot of horror movies, I have watched an inordinate amount of zombie films in the span of my lifetime. Honestly, it might be the one subgenre that I could confidently teach a history class on. Like it's that deep, you know. But yeah, I stand 10 toes down on that statement. Train to Busan is the best zombie movie I have ever seen. And I say that not just because it's true, but because it's the one zombie movie I've ever seen that manages to actually get everything right. And it manages to do it in such a succinct and precise way. We're like introduced to the characters in the setup in a precise amount of time that doesn't feel rushed, okay? Like everything that you're going to need to know about each of these characters, you find out within the first 30 minutes of this film. 30 minutes, I would say somewhere between 18 and 30 minutes conservatively. But then after that time is up, buckle up, Buttercup, because you, you are about to take a serious ride. The action in Train to Busan is very nearly nonstop. Like you get to know people, and then you start to care about whether or not they're going to make it, and then they just get snatched away in a rush of zombies. And the great thing is, zombie movies, like any other movie, has a plot hole or two that you kind of ignore if the movie is good enough. I sitting here thinking about it, I can't recall too many, if any at all, plot holes in this film, and that's because they don't really give you time for that. Like Train to Busan does not have time for anything that would cause a plot hole. Okay, once you start to get comfortable, we're back up and running, literally. Now, that being said, the best zombie movie I have ever seen is a movie that I myself have personally only seen twice. As I have stated in the beginning of this video, I have a fragile little brain when it comes to zombie movies. The intensity of this movie is just too much for me to handle. This is one of those zombie movies that made me ugly cry. Like really. And that's saying a lot, boy. Like me as an artist, do you know how much I would pay to be able to do something like that? To actually write something that makes you who have never met me, who don't know me from a hole in the wall, cry uncontrollably? I live to be able to affect people like that with my art. It's positively brilliant, and I have yet to see anything better than Train to Busan since it came out. And ironically enough, that includes its sequel. Its sequel is trash. Let's just be real. Its sequel wasn't good at all. Now, I have seen a lot of zombie films, so I could make this video a lot longer and list several more and the reasons why I think they're great. But I think I'm going to save that for my Venable list when I do make it. Yeah, that's a shameless plug. If you're not following me on Venable, you need to get on that right away. But yeah, the long and short of my personal feelings about a zombie movie is that they're a lot like tequila. Like tequila is great once in a while, and if it's mixed in a drink, but not a lot of us can drink shot after shot after shot without passing out. So yeah, I'm going to end this by saying what I always say: when watching horror, watch responsibly. So yeah, that is it for this week's video essay. Thank you so much for listening to me rant for a little bit. I post every 2 weeks, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss another episode. With that being said, I'll see you next time. Bye.